67. For Friday, patchy fog before 8 a.m. It's mostly sunny with a high near 88. Friday night is partly cloudy with a low around 65. I'm Daniel Clark, broadcasting live from the Tri-City Center at the 10 and 210 freeways. We are the trifecta of talk in Southern California. KCAA 102.3 FM, Riverside 106.5 FM, Redlands and the Legacy 1050 AM, Loma Linda, San Bernardino.
Are you underpaid and overworked? Is a living wage and employee benefits like affordable health care more of a dream than a reality for you and your family? If so, it's time to form a union. Don't be denied the wages and benefits you deserve. Come together in a union with the power of numbers. A union is not a privilege, it's your right, and it will make a difference. Contact Teamsters Local 1932, a powerful and successful labor union in San Bernardino, by visiting Teamsters1932.org/organize to start today.
Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. More Joe Biden. Remember when Donald Trump said you're going to get tired of winning? I don't know. I'm feeling the winning, and I'm not tired of it. But it's Joe Biden that's providing the big victories. And the big one today, the Department of Labor announced that they are going to increase the threshold for overtime exemption. I know this is really sexy stuff, really important stuff. But look, if you're one of the low-wage workers in this country, who the best thing that you've gotten over the last 20 years is a fancy nameplate with a title on it, this is a big deal. This is a BFD. This is a Biden big freaking deal. Because if you remember during the Obama years, the threshold had been something pathetically low, like $23,600. Which means if an employer paid you a salary of $23,600, they could work you 100 hours a week as long as they gave you a cute little title, like assistant manager, like sanitation engineer, like whatever. But cute little title, little name tag, put you in charge of something or someone. Now you're management. Now you're special, and you can work for poverty wages. And during the Obama years, I was advocating to change this. Obama said, we're going to jack that up to $47,000. And Republicans lost their minds. Literally lost their minds, went crazy. Oh my God, it's going to destroy work and nobody's going to want to work. And kind of the same garbage you hear now. Trump comes into office, lowers that 47 threshold down to 36. Still a bump, still a reasonable bump to help people put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. Well, Biden's Department of Labor today published a rulemaking notice saying they're going to bump that up to $55,068 or $1,059 a week to ensure that you truly are management. Now, look, this is, and I guess I got to explain this again so that Republicans don't lose their minds again. What's left of it, if there ever was anything. This isn't saying that you can't make people salaried non-exempt. It just means you have to pay them at least $55,068 to work them 100 hours a week. You can still work them, but if it's over 40 hours, you got to pay overtime. So you don't have to pay the $55,068. This isn't them saying you have to do it. No, it's simply saying that if you do, you can still give them the same cute little titles. They can still wear the nameplates you paid for them. Why not? But it means that overtime protections are going to matter again. It's going to mean that you're not going to designate someone the assistant to the assistant to the assistant and then let all of the you-know-what roll downhill onto their plates. It simply means we're going to return reward to work. And I got to tell you, and I keep coming back to this, Joe Biden was not my first choice in the primary. Was not. He was my fourth. This guy is freaking killing it. All of the things, and I come back to this, all of the things that my working class friends said about Trump. He's gonna raise our wages. He's going to bring back manufacturing. He's going to invest in infrastructure. He's going to bring back dignity to work. Biden's actually doing. And this is the part that's really kind of curious to me because, my red hat wearing friends, they don't believe it, which is the weird thing. They don't believe it. They don't believe it. No, it's a liberal conspiracy. No, this is the policy of the U.S. government. And fortunately, about time. It's about time that we have an administration that gives a tinker's damn about working people. Now, understand, all of this stuff will be challenged by corporate America. There will be suits, lots of lawsuits by people in high-price suits. We know this is going to happen. Same thing with the big announcement today on negotiating for prescription drugs for Medicare. Big freaking deal. Going to help millions of seniors be able to afford to get the life-saving drugs they need. Simply cannot believe that we allowed this to happen in the first place. But thank you, Republicans, for saying that Medicare was above every other aspect of our lives and that Medicare pays full price without ever asking what full price is. Because we're Americans, damn it, we pay full price for things, only in Medicare. Of course, Big Pharma will file lawsuits because it's what they do. But I look at the stuff that Biden's been doing, and this has been in the works throughout his administration. Returning reward to work. For me, as you know, anybody who's listened to this program for any length of time knows that's my true north for any administration. How are you going to return that idea that if you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead? That you can work hard, you can actually pull yourself up if someone gives you some bootstraps to pull on. This is the administration doing its part. And good on them for doing it, because here's the thing. The other side wants pain. They want recession. They want failure. They want chaos. Because the only way they can win elections. Because their ideas suck. Their policies are non-existent. And what their past, their history, I don't know that I'd want to run on that either. So when I saw this Washington Post story today, talking about how, credit cards are piling up, auto loans are piling up. There's some delinquencies on the rise, and it could get worse. And you go, yeah, it could. It could always get worse. Everything can get worse. But do you know why, credit card bills are on the rise? Do you know why, people are defaulting on auto loans? Do you know why people are struggling? It's simple. They don't have any money. I don't know how else to put that. I don't know how else to simply boil that down to the lowest common denominator for even the poorly educated that love Trump can figure out. If you had more money in your paycheck, if the labor that you do paid better, probably wouldn't have these problems, would we? The reason most people fall into credit card debt is they're paying for the bare essentials of life. Putting food on the table, keeping the lights on, putting gas in the car, clothes for the kids at school time. Instead of having the disposable income that past generations had, why did past generations have disposable income? You can say it with me. They had higher wages. They had a better distribution of the wealth that their labor creates. It's that simple. And why did they have that? Stronger unions, stronger government policies. Because you go back to where I started with this. This exempt threshold. You go back into the 70s, that number was, in today's dollars was in the upper 70,000, lower 80,000 range. Which meant if you were truly management, if you were truly salaried non-exempt, if you were truly exempt, if you truly were that salaried person, you made a pretty damn good living. And you took on the risk of, I may have to work a couple extra hours a week. Yeah, I'm going to take on a little extra responsibility because you were compensated for it. What's been allowed to happen over the last couple of decades is we've allowed wages to freeze and actually go back. And we've beat up on workers, the people who are showing up every day. This is an administration finally saying, look, we've had enough. We are going to return reward to work, and we're going to do it in a way where we're workers first, consumers second. I think this is fabulous. And every working person in this country should be getting on the inner tubes or sending emails or whatever, thanking this administration for finally pushing issues that benefit we, the working people. And now, look, understand, this is not a big, sexy thing. This is not, this isn't a ribbon. There's no ribbon cutting going to happen here. This is bureaucratic red tape at its finest. But what this is going to do, this is going to affect millions of people. This is going to make lives better. Well, how's it going to do that, Rick? No employer is going to pay that. Maybe not. But you know what's not going to happen out of that? That woman, that single mother who's the assistant manager at McDonald's or Burger King or whatever, she's not going to work 90 hours a week because nobody's coming in to relieve her. She's not going to work 90 hours a week because they're understaffed. And if she does work 90 hours a week, she's going to get overtime for 50 of them. That is a substantial increase. And for me, this is a big deal. And it's one of these days where, this last couple of weeks, it's been like every day, some one big freaking deal after the next. I can't wait for tomorrow. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Republicans in Michigan feeling the pinch. Fake electors in Michigan are feeling the pinch. And evidently a new group in Michigan, the Grand New Party PAC. I guess they've given up on the GOP. I guess they've given up on the Grand Old Party. They're now the Grand New Party. They're new. Did you know they're new? Brand new. But the Grand New Party, they're completely behind all of the fake electors. In fact, they are throwing a telethon. There's going to be a telethon for the fake electors because, as you know, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, who we've had on this program, filed charges against 16 of the false electors with 8 felonies each. Did that back in July, claiming that they violated state law against forgery as part of, quote, an organized effort to circumvent the lawfully cast ballots of millions of Michigan voters in a presidential election. They did that. There's no defense. There's no defense. How do you go into a courtroom and go, yeah, that's my name on the form. Yeah, that's a fake sheet. No, that's not real. I did represent myself as the elector. How are you going to defend that? Well, they're going to try, because they're going to try and raise some money on September 5th. They're going to have an 11-hour telethon, and I love this. Their executive director of the Grand New Party, Shane Trejo, he said this telethon will feature hours of original content, including human interest stories about the electors, showing what brave, patriotic conservatives they are. I'm sorry. When again did we start propping up criminals? When did breaking the law become? Now remember, this is the Law and Order Party. This is the GOP, or remnants of the former GOP. Here's my favorite part of this. You go, okay, well they're gonna try and humanize all of these criminals. The 16 people, they're gonna make a public showing of this. They're going to try and, I get it. You're gonna taint the jury pool by tugging at heartstrings, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot of these 16 people who are going to be sitting with puppies. There'll be babies, I'm sure, that, and not the ugly babies, but really cute ones. They'll have all that. And, and there'll be, the patriotic music, and there'll be flags waving. There'll be all of the, the imagery and stuff to try and, pull at your heartstrings, folks in Michigan who may be on this jury, to make you empathize, to make you see them as good human people that, I don't even know that at this point. But I love the fact that they're going to bring in two real powerhouse folks. They're going to bring some powerhouse talent in to help them raise some money. Rudy Giuliani is going to be there. Yep. Leaky Rudy going to be there. I got to wonder if he's going to be drunk. I wonder if they're going to cover his bar tab. Because I guess that's the only way you're going to get him around these days. But you're going to get Rudy, former mayor of New York City and former Trump attorney, and Steve Bannon. And when I saw Steve Bannon's name, my mind goes, well, why not just get Don Jr. and they'll steal whatever you got. Maybe they'll steal some cancer kids' money off the counter too. So I guess my question is, would you give money to a organization that, I don't know, is defending criminals? It's curious to me, and I'll be interested to see how many people actually chip in. And the weird thing is I'm sure conservatives will dig deep to help their brethren, but anybody else, forget it. And I point to, if you remember Hurricane Sandy, you had 67 Republicans who voted against aid for the victims in Hurricane Sandy. Yet anytime Florida needs money, dig deep. And that's why it brings me to Rick Scott. Rick Scott says he is now seeking to replenish the state's depleted federal disaster relief fund. Now remember, this is the guy who wants to destroy government. This is the guy who wants to steal your Social Security. This is the guy who's doing all of the stuff that he can possibly do to screw you and every other working person. But hey, Florida needs more money. And why? Well, he needs votes. This is what this is about. They understand that. Especially if they can get money from all around the country to fund their disasters. Now look, I'm not against helping people in need. We should be doing it, absolutely. But there's a point at which, and I'm going to use a conservative frame here. So if you trigger at conservatism, conservatives, prepare to be triggered. I'm one of those people who believes in you help people who are willing to help themselves. I am, and I know that sounds Republican, Rick. No, it sounds normal. If you're not willing to do things to help yourself, I'm not doing it for you. I tell my kids all the time, I'll help you with your homework, not doing it. I'll help you do things, not doing it for you. You got to learn this yourself. So I point to the fact that there was money in the Inflation Reduction Act that could have gone to green energy programs in Florida that Ron DeSantis turned down. About $350 million could have helped do something on the climate change front. Could have helped, turned it down. So this is, again, one of those questions of, when do we I know Republicans are big on walls. When do we build a wall? When do we say, Florida, sorry, building the wall? You're on your own now. When do we start cutting them off? And look, maybe the grand new party can have telethons for them. If you're not going to do anything to help, I don't know. Now, I know. I'm not saying that we're going to cut Florida off. We're not. But we should at least talk about it. It's kind of like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, we don't really want to impeach. We just want to have an inquiry. It's kind of that. I'm just asking the question. But I'm a little more serious about this, because if you're not going to actually do something to help alleviate the problem, when do we say enough already? Now, today is the anniversary of Franklin Roosevelt signing the Revenue Tax Act. The year was 1935. And he signed the Tax Act. And what I found interesting was his comment. He said, wealth in the modern world does not come merely from individual effort. It's the result of a combination of individual effort and the manifold uses of which the community puts forth. The individual does not create the product of his industry with his own hands. He utilizes the many processes and forces of mass production to meet the demands of the national and international market. Therefore, in spite of the great importance in our national life of the efforts and ingenuity of unusual individuals, the people in the mass have inevitably helped to make large fortunes possible. Without mass cooperation, great accumulation of wealth would be impossible, save by unhealthy speculation. He said, look, the reality is you made wealth off of the backs of we and the people in this community. You got to chip in. And in fact, raise the taxes up to a 75%, rate. Eventually went up to 92%. And guess what we did? We built stuff. Roads and bridges and education systems. We were part of a community. And I look to this moment that we're in, with all of the disasters going on, all of the things that are tearing us apart, all of the sideshows, and my mind comes to this place of, how do we come back to somewhere in the middle of the road where we're talking about how to move the country forward? Because understand, the next 20 years, at least in my crystal ball, looks really chaotic. Climate issues are going to get worse, and that's going to cause mass migration. And we are nowhere near yet set to figure out how we're going to deal with any of those issues. The globe is getting much more hostile. We're moving towards a more authoritarian rule, not just here at home with a grand new party, but globally, as people are getting angrier and less tolerant. And we can't seem to get past the simple stuff. How are we going to deal with the big stuff? What's interesting to me is I get emails every day from folks, and thank you for sending me your emails, telling me that, Trump's being persecuted and all of this kind of stuff. And I said, you know what? The one thing that we used to believe in this country was the rule of law. I find it ironic, and I'm focused on these fake electors and this telethon. I find it ironic that they will try every opportunity to lie, to cheat, to misdirect, to misinform. Every possible stunt, gimmick. But yet they won't take any of that into a court of law to make an actual defense. I look at what they're doing for Trump. They're talking about legislatures taking prosecutors off the job. They're talking about legislatures throwing Supreme Court justices off the bench for no reason. You're talking about all of the abuse of power to protect people who should have their day in court and have the best legal minds and ability to defend themselves of any citizen in the history of this country. And yet, they don't believe in our system. But tell us how much they love the Constitution. Because they're not going to take it into a court of law. They're not going to make an argument in court because they know how bad their hand is. And they know they lose. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots to get to when we come back and talk about the drug price thing. I'm interested to find out what good stuff is going to come of this. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day labor leader Luisa Moreno was born in Guatemala City. As a young woman, she fought for the admission of women into Guatemalan universities. After attending journalism school in Mexico City, Luisa moved to New York with her husband and worked as a seamstress. Outraged by low pay, racial discrimination, and poor working conditions, she led organizing efforts on the job. During the Great Depression, she worked as a full-time union organizer, first with the AFL, organizing black and Latina cigar rollers in Florida. But she also became active with the Communist Party and joined CIO efforts to organize cannery workers. Luisa led unionizing efforts of pecan shelling women workers in San Antonio, Texas, and then of cannery workers in Los Angeles. In 1938, Luisa helped organize the Spanish-speaking People's Congress. During World War II, she fought against discrimination in hiring of Mexicans in oil and war-related industries. In the 1940s, she became centrally involved in high-profile legal defense cases of Mexican-American youth prosecuted on frame-up charges. These included work around the 1942 Sleepy Lagoon case and then of victims of the Zoot Suit riots a year later. She continued union work in California, helping to organize and represent walnut pickers. By 1950, she was caught in the crosshairs of the McCarthy-era witch hunts. Luisa was targeted by Operation Wetback and offered citizenship status in return for testimony against radical labor leader Harry Bridges. When she refused, she faced deportation on the accusation that she had once been a member of the Communist Party. She returned to Guatemala and continued organizing workers throughout Central America. Luisa Moreno died in Guatemala in 1992. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Peggy Lee struck a mournful chord with her hit song, Is That All There Is? It was about the vapidity of life, and I found myself subconsciously singing along last week as I pondered the GOP presidential debate. Of course, these made-for-TV spectacles are more akin to mud wrestling than actual policy debates. Still, I dared hope for some tiny element of civic seriousness. After all, the 8 aspirants were auditioning to be, oh say can you see, the next president of the United States. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, for example, stands out as a textbook example of the vapidity of modern American politics. A rampaging ego with no core democratic principles, no authentic persona, no speaking from the heart, and no possibility of being elected, except that special interest powers have pumped him up with a couple $100 million to be their boy. Indeed, a strategy memo from DeSantis' own funders and consultants surfaced publicly just before last week's debate, confirming his vacuity as a candidate and a person. The detailed memo instructed him to avoid talking about policy solutions, to sledgehammer an opponent, to appear both for and against Trump, and maybe to show a little human emotion by talking about his kids. In short, he needs advisors to tell him how to be himself. DeSantis is hardly the first "Who Am I" candidate for the White House. Hillary Clinton's managers reintroduce her as the new real Hillary every couple of months in 2016. And Rick Perry's handlers tried to make him look smart by wearing horn-rimmed glasses. This is Jim Hightower saying this lack of authenticity is now the norm, for it allows big money to shape candidates in its image. And that's why today's public policies are overwhelmingly based on what money wants, not on public need and honest principle.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, as I've been saying, look, I think the Biden folks have been killing it with policy lately. On the labor front, just huge stuff. And yesterday, the prescription drug taking on Big Pharma. Who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk it? You think about the power that Big Pharma has in lobbying and the power that they've got. If you listen to RFK Jr., the lobbyists at the Big Pharma basically run the FDA. This is a big deal. which is why I've asked Meredith Basie to come talk with us. Meredith is the executive director of Patients for Affordable Drugs Now, their website, patientsforaffordabledrugsnow.org. We'll get links out on social media. Meredith, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So,
and with some news.
How big of a deal is this? I mean, it's a handful of drugs. How much difference can this make, and why is this important?
Yeah, I will start by saying this is a huge deal, and it was a really big day for people on Medicare in particular yesterday, because we're finally beginning to undo the nearly 20-year ban on Medicare, basically using its purchasing power to get lower drug prices, which is wild. But you were speaking to the power of pharma, and 20 years ago, they got a sweetheart deal, which allowed them to prevent Medicare from literally negotiating, which is just unthinkable.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, wild. And
no, I remember back then talking about this, going, how is it that is this American ignorance and bravado at its worst? Because we don't barter for prices. We pay full price, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, and for essential medicines, most of which are developed here with taxpayer dollars, right? So it has been finagling, and I think the power of pharmaceutical lobbyists and the money behind them that 20 years ago led to what happened then. But we have begun through the Inflation Reduction Act, and one of the key provisions, this Medicare negotiation provision, which was what happened yesterday. HHS, Health and Human Services, were able to announce the first 10 drugs, and to your point, just 10 to start, that will be negotiated. And those new drug prices will come into effect in 2026, so still some time ahead. But over the next few years, it will be up to 60 drugs up to 2029. And just on the 10 drugs that we're talking about now, Medicare spent $50 billion on these drugs a year. And I think it's $3.4 billion that seniors are paying for these drugs every year. So just with these initial 10, people are going to save many dollars individually. And over time, this impact for everybody, not just people on Medicare, is going to really be felt. And for me, I also have to say that, like, this is a crack in the power of pharmaceutical corporations, right? Like, this is people winning for once. Often there is another story to tell, but this is a really big deal. These drugs are essential medicines for cancer treatments, for people with diabetes, blood thinners, autoimmune conditions. And we represent at Patients for Affordable Drugs people living with conditions, all different conditions. Anyone can share their story with us. And what I wanted to say was, ultimately, we've been talking to a lot of these individuals, and we know how much of a difference this is going to make in their lives. And you can read these stories, but I should also note, we don't take any money from pharmaceutical corporations. So we keep our distance, because some patient groups, that's not the case.
No, that's important, just to stay pure to the message. But, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about my father-in-law, who retired, went on Medicare, and then got hit with his drug prices, and actually had to go back to getting a job just to pay for, you know, the donut hole. So he never really got to retire. He had to continue to do some kind of work just to pay for drugs, which is insane to me. Because all we're doing is fattening the bottom line of these people who have been robbing us blind for decades.
Robbing you blind is exactly right, especially when, you know, in other parts of the world, these drugs, the very same drug, is a fraction of the price. And Americans here pay the most for their drugs than any other country in the world. So this is just the beginning of what we hope will be a continued push. We will certainly be pushing, and I know people in other organizations are fighting for this. But to your point about your father, we were hearing from one of our patient advocates yesterday, Stephen Hadfield, who's 71, from North Carolina, and he lives with a rare cancer and type 2 diabetes. And he was just saying that he was afraid to retire for that very reason, because at the moment, his insulin had been costing him $400. Now, with another provision of the Inflation Reduction Act, that's now going to only cost him $35, which is a huge difference and a huge saving. But one of those other drugs is going to be negotiated that he's on, Januvia, as we go forward. So it's going to make a real difference to ordinary people, and it's about time.
Now, you said a moment ago, and I've repeated this a lot over the last several years, that Medicare is the only organization that does not negotiate for drugs. We pay the sticker price, whatever inflated price pharma wants to charge us. We pay as a matter of law, and we're, I guess, proud of that because we're Americans. We're number one. There's something we're number one at. We pay the most for prescription drugs. How is it around the rest of the world? And do they get the same drugs, or do we get some kind of Chinese knockoff version?
No, so I come from the UK, and right here we're talking about insulin, and insulin in the UK would just be equivalent to a handful of dollars, right? Whereas here in this country, people are paying who are not on Medicare hundreds and hundreds of dollars because of the monopoly of the three, we call them cartel, the insulin cartel, Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, and Sanofi. So most other countries around the world, their governments negotiate with pharmaceutical corporations, which makes sense because you have a massive market. And the US is the only country until today that hadn't been able to do something like that. Although I should note that the VA is able to negotiate. So they're already negotiating that sort of section for drug prices, but it's not transparent. And so none of it makes any sense, but it only makes sense if you follow the money. And we know that pharmaceutical corporations have a lot of money, and they have 3 lobbyists per person here in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill to make sure that their voices are heard over the people's. But honestly, this is why it's so exciting what happened yesterday and such a big win. And what's extraordinary is 80% of people in this country, so it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are, 80% of people in this country believe that Medicare should negotiate drug prices.
Duh.
So it's kind of obvious.
No, I mean, that seems quite simple. Yeah, I mean, I don't know anybody. Well, actually, I do know one person who went into a car dealer and didn't try to haggle them down. But that's another story. But most people, they want to negotiate for the best price, except, I guess, like we do. So let me ask you this, because in talking especially about insulin, I saw Gavin Newsom not too long ago said that, the state of California is going to start producing insulin. Is that a pathway forward? I mean, at some point, if private interests aren't going to serve the needs of the public, don't we have to do it for ourselves?
I mean, I think it's a smart idea. I think other countries, like Brazil, for example, during the height of the HIV crisis, decided, hey, this is something we need to look at ourselves. And I think that is what is happening with insulin. And I absolutely support that happening. But we also need relief for people now, right? So both of those things need to happen. But really, if these pharmaceutical corporations could tomorrow lower their prices, they have made a profit for decades. Insulin is interesting because it's 100 years old. Last year, 2022 was the centenary, and it was discovered by Banting and Best at a university. It was sold for like a symbolic $1. So if people tell you the patent system is working,
it's working. No, it's working for the handful that are making huge amounts of profit, and the shareholders who are lining their pockets. It's working where I argue these things are working the way they're supposed to. It's not supposed to help you and me and the working people of this country or this planet, for that matter. These systems are in place to ensure that our elite, that our oligarchs, our wealth class is well heeled and well protected.
I couldn't agree more, and that is something that needs to be addressed, and this is something that is, I think, a big win for people. We need this win to be extended now, not just to people on Medicare, but to everybody in this country, and even people without insurance, because you mentioned list prices. Like, if you don't have insurance, you're going to be paying a massive price for insulin, for a cancer treatment, for whatever you might need, because you have very little coverage. And I should also mention, we must know or it's evidence that what is in these drug pricing provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, and specifically the Medicare negotiation announcement yesterday with these first 10 drugs, we know there's good substance in it because multiple pharmaceutical corporations are now suing to stop its implementation.
No, that's what I was going to ask you about, because we keep talking about this as a victory. Look, they've got tons of resources. They've got armies of attorneys. They've probably got judges that they've gotten onto the courts. Because this is where I wanted to go next. What are the chances that this victory that we're feeling very confident and very supportive of isn't a victory at all, and we have a court system that really isn't on our side?
I mean, that's a risk. The American people, we know, are on our side, and pharmaceutical corporations will be wildly unpopular, even more than they already are, if this were to move. But I'm not a lawyer, but from the people that I've been speaking to on this issue, and people who do understand this, we've supported an amicus brief led by Public Citizen recently. The suggestions that this is not this is unconstitutional doesn't fool anyone, and we know what this is really about, which is about protecting their profits and their bottom line. It's really not about anything other than that. So you never know what could happen. That's true with the court system. But we are confident and hopeful that this will continue to be a good day for people, and that this win will be expanded as we go forward.
And what's that future expansion look like? I mean, I think did you say 60 drugs down the road is what they're looking into?
Exactly. So we have 10 drugs that will start, the negotiation starts now, and you're looking at somewhere between, I think, a 25% and 60% reduction possibly on some of these drugs. And then over the year after, it'll be 15 drugs, another 15 after that, and in the final year, 10. So it will be 60 of the most expensive drugs. But there is ambition, I believe, and amongst this community, and proposals as well, to support further expanding. I know that President Biden is also interested, and has proposed moving beyond what is now the law. So more to come, we hope.
No, hopefully. But I have a lot of people ask me how this is all fine, well, and good. How are we getting to lower prices? What does this negotiation look like? Because, in any negotiation, the only real power consumers have is to walk away. Clearly, we can't walk away from these drugs if the pharmaceutical companies say, we're just not going to sell them to you at any lower of a price. What recourse do we have? I have friends who say we should be engaging in reimportation. We should be buying drugs from other countries. There should be all these things. What are your suggestions or thoughts on that?
I think we need to look at size in the same way that European countries that are much smaller, they negotiate with pharmaceutical corporations, and there's not a country in the world that pharmaceutical corporations don't make a profit. They're not going to walk away from $50 billion a year that is spent just on these drugs alone. Like, even if it's less, they're not walking away from that. There's no way.
Yeah, $47 billion, so that we don't charge seniors in their golden years. Because at some point, we've got to be looking at what's happened over the last 50 years. As we were making Medicare better, they've been trying to make it worse, and here we are. But it is a good day. I'm excited about the future. If people want more information on this and maybe how to get involved to push further, what should folks do?
We would love to hear from folks. And if you actually have your own story, this is what we do, is amplify patient voices in the media on Capitol Hill to make sure that these figures that people hear about are not just figures. The human story is there. So you can look for us at Patients for Affordable Drugs.org, or Patients for Affordable Drugs now.org. You can find us also on social media. There's also a link on those pages to share your story. So if you're interested, either in English or Spanish, to share your story, you can do that. And we would love to hear from you. And if you're on one of these drugs too, or one of the ones that wasn't negotiated, we also want to hear from you, because we are also continuing to push. There's a number of bipartisan bills to lower drug prices that we are supporting as well. And we're hoping to continue to push to lower drug prices for everyone. So we need your voices too. So thank you for that shout out.
Very good. Meredith, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again as the successes roll and build. And
we will keep fighting. Absolutely. And pleasure to be here. Thank you. And this is a good day, and it's good to have some positive news in this front.
That's why I had you. Thank you for brightening us up a little bit. Thanks so much, Meredith.
Thank you. Take care. Be well.
Meredith Basie, Executive Director of the Patients for Affordable Drugs Now group, patientsforaffordabledrugsnow.org, the website, if you want to check out the work that they do. Quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the day that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Revenue Tax Act, more popularly known as the Wealth Tax. The act reformed the federal income tax to raise rates on the wealthiest in the nation. Those making over $5 million a year could pay taxes up to 75%. In a speech to Congress that summer, Roosevelt had explained his thoughts on wealth and taxes. The president said, quote, "Wealth in the modern world does not come merely from individual effort. It results from a combination of individual effort and of the manifold uses to which the community puts that effort. The individual does not create the product of his industry with his own hands. He utilizes the many processes and forces of mass production to meet the demands of a national and international market. Therefore, in spite of the great importance in our national life of the efforts and ingenuity of unusual individuals, the people in the mass have inevitably helped to make large fortunes possible. Without mass cooperation, FDR said, great accumulation of wealth would be impossible save by unhealthy speculation." The president went on, as Andrew Carnegie put it, where wealth accumulates honorably, the people are always silent partners. Whether it be wealth achieved through the cooperation of the entire community or riches gained by speculation, in either case, the ownership of such wealth or riches represents a great public interest and a great ability to pay. Although FDR tried to win over the nation's wealthy by quoting industrialist Andrew Carnegie, he did not gain their support. Not surprisingly, many of the nation's wealthy lobbied for and used tax loopholes to evade paying the new tax rates. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You gotta love Alabama. Evidently, Alabama State Representative David Cole has been charged with felony voter fraud. Class C felony could mean 10 years in prison. He's been released on $2,500 bond. Evidently, he was elected to represent the 10th district in Alabama's legislature. The only problem is he lives in the 4th. Now, what's interesting is evidently he sat for a deposition, and they asked him about a home that supposedly he owns in the district that he represents, but doesn't actually live in. And he was asked if he could remember if he had ever, moved any of his personal things in. He gave the old Reagan thing. I don't recall. He was asked whether he could recall if he had ever slept overnight in the home. He could not recall. Have you ever had a meal in the house? Could not recall. Have you ever bathed in the house? Could not recall. Which means he didn't want to lie, and good on him, didn't want to lie. But just the failing memory thing. I hope he gets what he deserves. and a little time would not be a bad thing. Little introspection. Let's quick go to the phones. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are you?
I'm insane. Are you happy?
I am always happy to hear from you. What's on your mind?
Well, first let me comment on that. I have a cousin who her husband's company sent him to Alabama, and they had to buy a home, and they lived down there for about 10 years, and she was just miserable. And then when he retired, they sold the house and moved back here. She said, it's like a third world country down there. So, sweet home Alabama, yay. But what I wanted to comment on was, it is about time that we are negotiating with these pharmaceutical companies, because these drug prices are outrageous. And, they took steps how many years ago to make sure that people couldn't order them from Canada. I forget who it was that was behind that, but I'm sure it was a Republican.
It was Bernie
group.
Sanders who was behind reimportation, and it was the Republicans who tried to block it. In fact, Sanders, when he was a congressman, used to drive people to the border to buy their drugs so that they could bring them back. That's why I love Bernie.
Yeah, that makes no sense. And well, it's so long ago, you see the Republicans tried to do something about it. Now we've got the flip-flop. But what I wanted to say was, so it's good that we've negotiated this, because I know my friend Jean, her husband had type 2 diabetes, and they had to file for bankruptcy because they had charged their credit card for so many times because they couldn't afford the insulin.
No, and the thing is, insulin is one of those things that if you stop and think about it on a cost-benefit analysis, you'd want to give it away. Because if you don't control the diabetes, and then you ended up chopping things off of people, and all of the horrible things that medically have to happen down the road that are much more expensive, much more invasive, not to mention the disability that comes out. There's just so much negative to putting a high barrier to getting people the insulin that they need. It's mind-blowing that we don't just give it away.
I agree with you. I mean, it's one of those things. This is something, if you don't have it, it's going to lead to your death. Sure enough. But have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks, Alice. And not just your death. I mean, it's going to lead to, I watched this happen with my grandfather. He was somebody who, did not follow the regiment, and they basically started cutting things off of him. He eventually went blind. I mean, all of this terrible. And a lot of it has to do for a lot of people. They can't afford the drug, so they start rationing it. They start taking half doses just to make it go a little bit longer. And is that smart? It's the whole thing around the healthcare argument that they made back during the Obama years. I'm a big preventative care guy. Make it as easy to get preventative care as possible. Make it as inexpensive. Because we used to understand, an ounce of prevention, pound of cure. Remember that kind of Ben Franklin-esque thinking? Penny wise, pound foolish. That kind of stuff. We seem to be all of the wrong in that. And for me, the simple explanation here, the simple remedy, making it more accessible. My wife and I were just talking about this today, which is why I remembered my father-in-law having to work, into his retirement. Because I've said, look, if you lowered the Medicare age down to 55, you'd see a lot of people retiring. And she's like, yeah, I don't know that I agree with you on this because of the drug costs. And for me, that's one of those things that I had forgotten that he went through that. So this again, huge step forward for working people. The question that I have, because again, if you've listened to me any length of time, I'm kind of jaded, a little bit pessimistic. What does our court system do? What do the people in robes do? What do these high-priced attorneys get away with? How do the courts, and I haven't even gotten into the Republican Party yet, and conservative Democrats, what do they do to undo this or lessen it? That's my concern. But for right now, this is a big deal. The direction this administration is moving the country is in the right direction, regardless of what the F channel and what the red hats are whining about. we're heading in the right direction. And I'm telling you, Biden is killing it. Absolutely, without question, killing it.
This segment sponsored by the all-new Rams Market, Rams Express Car Wash, and the Rams Ultimate One-Stop Shop at 2090 Mentone Boulevard on the corner of Crafton Hills Avenue, just across from Jacinto Farms. Rams is now open. All new, well-stocked, bringing fresh and sharp convenience to Mentone with their clean, safe chemicals that leave your car all shiny and protected. When you buy gas inside the One-Stop Shop, you'll get savings on your car wash, make life easy, and sweeten it all with Rams. You can save with the dinosaur and their